Hey guys, welcome to the final video of this design package, and today we're going to talk about the rendering, the lights, how to compose the image in Photoshop. And this is going to cover pretty much all my passes. Like for all the images that are rendered in ZBrush, they kind of have the same process. I'm going to talk about some other images, and I'm going to give you guys another examples of some work rendered in ZBrush, so you're going to be able to recreate those scenes, and you're gonna understand how I work with the lights and what I usually do inside of ZBrush and outside of ZBrush in Photoshop. So we got the design model done with the body and the head textured, and we're gonna start rendering this guy. So the first thing I usually do is just double the size of the document, and the size of the document will always be the size of your image that you're gonna export. So for example, if you go under the document palette on the top, and if we put like 8000 by 8000 in here, that's going to be the final size of your image. And I always try to work as double as I would like it to be. So let's say I want it to be like 1600, the final one. I'll probably go up to 3200 and then export, and then work with the half size, just as ZBrush works better like that. So you can see just double the size, and then I click half, so I can only see the half size, but actually the actual final size that I'm going to export is going to be 3200. So first things first, I'm just going to create a view. I'm just going to create a camera for my render, and this is very important to use Z-Link just to store that view, because if you rotate the model a little bit, and if you lose that angle, and then you're gonna have to re-render every single pass that you did. So very important to just store the camera and then go under Document, Z-Link, and then save that camera. So if ZBrush crashes, or if you wanna continue your render, or if you wanna create passes in the future, make sure you store that camera, you store that angle, and then we're gonna start playing with those lights, and we're gonna start changing those settings. So basically what you have to know about the shadow is that the angle right there, it controls how much the shadow is going to spread. So if we got a very low angle, like 10 or 15, it's going to be the shadows are going to be very harsh, very hard shadows. If we go up to 50, 60, depending on your scale, the shadow is going to start to spread. It's going to be a very soft shadow. And if you upres this angle value, you're going to have to upres this raise value, otherwise you're going to get a very noisy shadow because of the samples. So if this value is higher, the raise should go higher as well. So I wouldn't go too crazy with the raise value. Usually I'd go up to 30, 40, it works pretty good. So you can see I'm just going to put 30 on the angle and just going to do a quick render on this. So you can see just using the BPR up there, ZBrush automatically created the shaded pass, the Z-depth, the shadow, and the mask, and we're gonna use those in Photoshop. And just by clicking on those options, on those images, those small thumbnails, I can just export those. So if I click, I'm just gonna save those as a PSD, save the Z-depth, save the shadow, save the mask. So next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create an ambient occlusion, and I'm gonna create a SSS pass. So I'm not changing any settings on this. ZBrush does a pretty good job with the default settings, and I can always tweak them in Photoshop later. So I'm just gonna do that, and just to reuse those passes, I'm just gonna do a top light. So remember, the first one that I did was more of a neutral light coming from the camera type of thing, so very central, very even light. Second one I'm gonna do, it's a top light. So again, just changing that light, and then hit render again. This is gonna take a little bit more time because we render an ambient occlusion, and we render a SSS pass. So I'm just gonna re-export those. The Z-depth is always gonna be the same. The mask is always gonna be the same. The SSS is always going to be the same, and the ambient occlusion always going to be the same, because those are not depending on the light. So now I'm going to turn off the ambient occlusion, I'm going to turn off the SSS, because again, they are always going to be the same. There's no reason for us to re-render those. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a side light, and you're gonna understand the reason when I'm start composing those images in Photoshop. But basically I'm creating a more of a global illumination fill, and that's gonna give me control in Photoshop to change the light direction, because we're getting lights from all the angles. So that's our side light, and I'm just gonna re-export only the shaded version. I don't need the shadow, I don't need the Z-depth, I don't need the mask. And now I'm gonna create another side light coming from the other side. Hit render again, and then I'm gonna re-export that shaded. So now I'm creating a light from the bottom again, just to have more control in Photoshop. So put it down, and I'm hitting render again. Wait a couple seconds, I'm gonna re-export that shaded pass. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start creating those backlights. And the thing about ZBrush and the lights, if you only click on the light, it's gonna bring the light to the back. If you only click on this sphere of the light, it's gonna bring the light to the front again. So if you just click, it's gonna move the light from the back, and then you can start moving that on the back, and we're gonna start creating those backlights. I'm gonna crank up the intensity just a little bit, and there you go. Got our first backlight. I'm gonna move that to the side, re-render, second backlight. I'm gonna do one for the top. And again, I'm not worrying too much about the placement of the light, because we can always change the intensity, since we got them from all the angles, we can change the position in Photoshop. I'm basically covering all my options here. So you can create as many layers as you want. Usually I don't go too crazy, because it's hard to start getting messy in Photoshop. So you can see I created all those renders using the basic material. Usually I try to leave it with a very low spec. I don't go too crazy on the spec, because it's easier to add that spec in Photoshop than to remove it. So it's a little bit too much, I would say, for this, but it's fine for now. And then we can always add the spec on top, and that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna use the reflected map to create those specular, and this works pretty good for skin. This works pretty good for metal or leather. You only have to go to material and change the spec size if you want different materials, but it gives us a nice environment reflection. You can see I'm applying it to everything, and I'm changing the light position, and I'm re-rendered this guy. So now I'm exporting the shaded again. I'm picking a different light position. It's going to change the spec a little bit, because one thing about the spec, really, in real life, the spec is kind of like if you use V-Ray, it actually respects the environment. It reflects the environment, right? So by having the environment in this material, we're kind of recreating that illusion of the spec. So I'll pick a different spec light position again, and re-render the spec. I'm trying to get some nice spec on the face on that one. Again, doing that backlight. So I'm trying to get some nice spec variation on the side. A little bit from the top. So now after we're done with the spec, I'm going to start creating some passes based on different matte caps. And if you don't know what matte cap is, if you open your material library inside of ZBrush, so those right here on the top, those are matte caps, right? And basically a matte cap is a light baked inside of the material. So those have light information on them, so they don't react with the light that you're using. The standard materials on the bottom, those don't have any light information on them, so they're gonna react with the light. That's why we're using basic materials, and you can use any of those materials to create different passes based on the light that you have on the scene. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna start creating some render passes based on matte caps, and that's gonna give us a little bit of variation with that light information baked on the material. And you can find a lot of cool matte caps on the Pixelogic website. There's a lot of on the matte cap library over there. There's a lot of cool different ones that you can try. actually a lot of old ones that are pretty cool if you're doing like more of a stone look, or if you're doing like marble, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of cool matte caps. So this one that I'm using is the Skin, the ZBrush Skin matte cap, and this is gonna give us a little bit of cool variation on the matte cap that we can use and compose it inside of Photoshop. So I'm just gonna export this guy, maybe increase the angle a little bit so it kind of, you're gonna see it's gonna soften the shadow. There you go. That's what we talked about in the beginning. Back to the basic material. And you can see I have the basic material for the body, but I have a toy plastic material applied to the eye. So now we're gonna move to Photoshop, and what I did here, I opened all the render passes and I'm just gonna copy and paste them into one file, right? So now we have all those renders that we did, and basically I'm organizing it for with all the lights at the bottom. And let me go to Photoshop and show you guys. Okay, so I have all the base lights on the bottom, so the front, the side lights, the top light, and then I start adding the backlights. So I have all the 3 backlights on the top, and then we have the matte cap render, and then we start adding the spec lights, so spec 1, spec 2, spec 3, spec 4, and then we got the SSS that we're gonna tweak on the top. So you can see the organization from the file. I try to keep it very organized like that because we can keep tweaking and we're not gonna lose track of where the things are. And then we got the shadow pass, that first shadow. You can see the rays are very bad. We can up-res that if you wanna have a better quality render. And then we got the second shadow, Z-depth, and then ambient occlusion at the top. So basically we're gonna start composing those render passes. So the first one, we got the neutral at the bottom, and then we got the light coming from the bottom as the second one. And we can use this in 2 ways. We can use it as a screen mode in Photoshop. That's gonna add all the light information on top of whatever we have, or we can use as a normal, just as a normal blend, and then we can play with the opacity and play with the influence of those lights, right? Can also crank up that level, just get more of the saturation, and then only have that light adding as a screen mode. And then for the second light, you can see here, if I only play with the opacity, I'm gonna change that light source and I'm gonna change the influence. If I put it as a screen mode, I'm just gonna add that light information. And I like to just play with the opacity for those base renders because we can get that nice global illumination feel. Same thing for the top light. You can see by blending all those lights together, I can start having a more neutral light. It's not going to be a very strong and one source light. I can like have a more global influence into my render, having multiple lights. For the backlight, I like it to use as a screen mode because it's just gonna add that light information, the very white light information. So you can see if I put it as a screen mode, it's just gonna add that. And then we can play with the levels, we can play with the color. So I'm just changing the contrast on the level. Same thing for the SSS pass. I'm just gonna use this as a normal, and I'm gonna add more information. So same thing when we're sculpting the secondary information. As much, if we keep adding more information, just keeps getting more and more natural. And if we do that same thing for the render, if we keep adding more render passes and adding more lights and adding more information on your scene, it's just gonna get more natural. So now that we got all the lights in there, we can keep tweaking. We can tweak the backlight. We can go back and start changing that light influence and changing the light placement. So now that we got all the lights in the bottom, I'm gonna start playing with the spec. So the spec is the same thing as the backlight. If we crank up the the levels and then we use as a screen mode, we only gonna get the highlights of the image, so you can really see in here, and then you can work with a very low opacity for that. Again, if we keep adding more, we get more information, we get more of the environment on our spec, we get more reflections, we get a more realistic feel. And then for the shadows, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just changing the hue saturation. I'm using colorize, and I'm gonna make the shadows a little bit red just because of the skin, a little bit purple. Then we're gonna use as a multiply, very low intensity. Same thing for the second shadow. Now I'm gonna get more cold kind of feel, just to get some balance for the skin. Looking good. Same thing for the ambient occlusion, just use as a multiply. And now I'm gonna group everything, and I'm gonna copy and paste the mask on my mask for the group, and that's gonna give us the cut for the background, right? So now we can paint whatever we want for the background, and we got everything, all those layers using a mask that we exported. Pretty straightforward. You can see ZBrush, we cannot paint any spec mask or spec level, so I'm just creating a mask in Photoshop, and I'm painting some regions that I don't want it to be too shiny, and I'm leaving regions like the mouth or the eyes that I want it to be more shiny than the body, so I'm painting that in Photoshop. You can see we already have a very global illumination feel with our render. Now it's just a matter of tweaking those lights, tweaking the spec, and make it look as good as we can, because now we got all the layers in there. We can change the light position, or we can keep adding. Since we got the camera in ZBrush, we can go back and keep adding like a cavity map, or render like a cavity pass, or render whatever we want to do, just to keep adding more information in there. This is just me tweaking the layers and trying to get something more cool out of it. So you can see if I go back there and start tweaking the lights and the light influence, changing that opacity, I'm still gonna have all those layers on the top, and because it's organized, we can always go back and change that light. Now on something more dramatic, so I'm just tweaking that top light, adding some of the backlights on the top, and what I'm doing there, I'm just basically colorizing my backlight to more of a blue color, so we don't have to tweak the light color in Photoshop. We can always go back or go in Photoshop. Sorry, we don't have to tweak that color information in ZBrush. We can always go to Photoshop and change that color. That's that bottom light, and I'm gonna use that for the eye because of the eye refraction. I mean, if the light comes from the top, that, like we discussed, the bottom of the eye is gonna kind of glow a little bit. So I'm using that bottom light to get that glow from the bottom of the eye, and I'm using a mask in Photoshop to kind of paint that out. So I'm changing the background, and one thing I like to do on the background, it's always to paint where the backlight is coming from a little bit brighter. So I changed the background to black, and I'm using a white brush to kind of give a little information of the backlight and give a little bit of glow, and really detach that character out of the background. Then later I'm gonna use textures or photo images to add some variation to that background. So now we're gonna start using that SSS pass that we did, and you can see it's very large, it's not very good right now, but there's a lot of information in there. So if we tweak the levels, we're gonna start seeing a lot of cool stuff in there. So you can see the tip of the ear, we got some cool information. So I'm gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna colorize it to a red, and I'm gonna use as a screen mode, and then I'm just gonna paint a mask in Photoshop just to isolate the areas that we don't want. So for example, the horns, I don't want any SSS in there, or maybe just a little bit, but we sure want in the ears, just to get some cool just some cool color variation in there. So again, ZBrush gave us a very cool default SSS pass that we only have to tweak in Photoshop, tweak the levels a little bit, and start using as a screen mode, just to get some nice information. So you can see I'm going back in there with the first passes of the light, and I'm tweaking those, and on the fly I can just tweak the light position. This is very good for a concept artist. I mean, if you have a good sense of like painting in Photoshop, you have all those layers in your available to you, so you can tweak them. Sorry if it's too fast. I mean, you guys can always go back and watch it again if you miss something, or ask questions on Facebook, or send me an email. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Just by make sure you got everything organized. I mean, I'm only using the screen mode and the multiply pretty much. Just by creating all those layers, you can all those passes and organizing them as a layer. I mean, it's pretty straightforward to compose your image. I mean, I always use reference. I mean, reference is really important, and make sure you got something, some reference that you like the light information in there, the light that they use, and then try to recreate that. Right? Try to find the right light placement, and I mean, it's gonna be pretty easy to do that in ZBrush and export all those passes. So what I'm doing now, I created a copy of everything that we have so far, and I'm just gonna start playing a little bit with the values of the image. I'm just darkening the bottom a little bit using the color burn, just to get the eye focused more on the face, changing the contrast of some parts. Now I'm using just to get those highlights a little bit, and I like to do that a lot in the face, giving a lot of attention to the face, trying to fix the contrast and the shadows on the eyes, which is very important just to get the eye to look good. So you can see I'm just darkening the top of the eye a little bit, and I'm just gonna brighten the bottom of the eye so I can get some nice highlights in there. Same thing for the lips, just adding a little bit of highlight always helps with get more of a flashy look. Darkening those horns. I mean, you can spend a lot of time in Photoshop if you want to, just to get it as good as you can. I mean, if for an illustration, like, you can spend a lot of time in Photoshop. I try not to do too much in Photoshop, just to keep it more of the 3D model. It's always good to just work a little bit of those highlights and like the ambient occlusion, so you can see the difference. Really try to get the attention more to the face, so I'm darkening all the rest. And before it was very even, the light information on the image, and now we can start having more of the light on the face. And again, before this I just toned down just a little bit, I think like about 50% of what I did, so again, just to not go too much on the color fixing. And now I'm just gonna start using textures in Photoshop. So I just grab a texture from the CG Textures website, just a normal concrete photo. I'm just placing on top, using the clone stamp just to get it on the image, and I'm just use that as a soft light or hard light, and again, very subtle, just to add a little bit more information. Now I'm applying like a scratch texture, same thing, using as a hard light, very subtle, and that's just gonna give us some color, some texture, and some photo detail to your image. You can always do that back in ZBrush and then re-export a layer if you want it to be more accurate. But right now it's just to give us some more information to the final image. Nothing too extreme or nothing too strong. It's very subtle, just to add that small noise, small breakup to the texture. Again, going back there, I can always start tweaking. This is more of a level correction, darkening more the background, some color correction, just making it a little bit more bluish, taking a little bit of the red out. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna use the ZDAP pass. Remember we did that, we still haven't used it. I'm just gonna copy that pass. I'm gonna go to the alpha channel. I'm just gonna place that, paste that image in the alpha channel, and that's gonna allow us to use a lens. If you go to filter, blur, lens blur, we can use that alpha channel to change our lens blur. So basically, anywhere I click on the image, it's gonna pick our focus point, and I'm just gonna keep the radius very low, and I'm using an octagon shape. You can see if I increase that radius, it's really gonna blur our image. So if I click on the nose, it's picking that focal point, and I'm just gonna leave it very low, like 15 or 10. Again, very subtle. Maybe you guys can't see on the video, but you can always open the Photoshop file and check it out. So last final couple touches that we can do, I always like to go to the red channel of the image and then blur the red channel a little bit, so it kind of blurs just the red channel of the image. Is very nice for skin. You guys can always try that out. Just gives us a nice, very nice like skin shader feel to the final image. And I guess last final touch that I like to add, I like always to add a little bit of noise to our final image. So if you go to filter, noise, and then very low value, just breaks up a little bit of the ZBrush clean render. Almost all the renders has a little bit of noise. Even pictures or photos has a little bit of noise in it. And that's pretty much it. You can always use sharpen tool in Photoshop. You can always use, I mean, whatever. You guys probably know a lot more Photoshop than I do. That's the pretty basic stuff that I use just to get all those render passes composed into one image. Again, you can always go back and play with the light position again, because we got everything super organized. Very easy, very straightforward. I'm gonna give some of the other examples of my renders for you guys to check it out. You can always go to my website, and there's a lot of you can see from pretty much all the images that I have, all the render passes that I did in ZBrush. That's pretty much how I compose them in Photoshop. So I hope it makes more sense to you guys. Again, play with this file. See if you guys can create something cool out of it. I'm looking forward to see what you guys come up with. I hope this really helps you guys. I really appreciate all the support throughout this Gumroad. This is the first package that I did. I'm hoping to have time to do a couple more for you guys, covering some other ZBrush techniques and covering some other pipelines like ZBrush for prototyping, ZBrush for statues, ZBrush for games, with maybe some quick tips for you guys. Thanks again. Keep tagging me with all the work that you guys been doing with this. I hope it helped you. Keep working on your personal stuff. I hope this inspired you, and it's gonna help you finish more works. Make sure you tag me. I love to see what you guys been doing with this. Thanks again for the support. I hope to see you guys very soon, and take care.